What's going on?
Help! Take me to jail.
Where's the?
I'm not Mark. I'm looking at Mark. Here's Shannon.
Right, and this
Here's
is
Sean.
Lisa Alderman
I know,
Olson.
I know.
It's all right. I've been out in the sun quite a bit the last couple of days too.
No, I
so.
just have a hard time with names and dates, or names and faces, and I know who you are, just,
We'll call the meeting of the Minot City Council to order for today, Monday, July 15th, 2019. Again, appreciate everyone being able to be here for the meeting, not only in chambers, but also viewing online. If you would put your cell phones on vibrate or on silence, we can keep the distractions down, as many as we can anyways. Roll call.
Janser.
here.
Olson. Here. Pittner. Padragula.
Here.
Here.
Wolski.
Here.
Sitma.
Here, we do have a quorum. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Number 3 on our agenda this afternoon is personal appearances. This is an opportunity for anyone in the audience to come and speak on an item that we either have on the agenda or do not have on the agenda. Just ask that if you do come forward that you say your name so we do have it for the record. One last call for personal appearances. Seeing none, we will move on to consent items. I have been asked to pull 4.2, and we do have 4.1 through 4.9. Do we need any other items from or 4.10? I have an old agenda on with me. I will get a new one. Thank you. Pulling 4.2, do we have any others that we need to pull? We just need 4.2, number 5 and 6. Can we pass 1 through 4? We can, okay. Is
Mr.
everyone
Mayor?
clear?
I would move approval.
Motion by Alderman
Second.
Olson, second by Alderman Janser on consent on all of the items except for 4.2, number 5 and 6. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Olson. Yes. Padragula.
Yes.
Straight.
Yes.
Wolski.
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 4.2 on our agenda, number 5 is the ordinance 5403. This is amending chapter 23, the marijuana offenses. Look for a motion.
I move it.
Motion
Second.
to approve by Alderman Janser, second by Alderman Olson. Discussion. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Janser.
Yes.
Olson. Yes. Padragula.
Yes.
Straight.
Yes.
Wolski.
No.
Sitma.
Yes. Motion approved. 4.2, number 6 on our agenda is the ordinance 5404, amending chapter 2-30, the order of business with personal appearances.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderman Olson,
Second.
second by Alderman Janser. Discussion. Alderman Straight.
Mr. Mayor, I guess after our discussion last month, I'm going to stick with your recommendation to try this for a period of time. I'd like to maybe reinvestigate it in 6 months, if that's okay with you, sir.
We can certainly revisit it at our leisure down the road if it does pass. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Olson. Yes. Padragula.
No.
Straight.
Yes.
Wolski.
No.
Sitma.
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion passes. That takes us to our action items on our agenda for this evening, and that is number 5. 5.1 is the men's, the men's winter refuge lease renewal. The recommendation to the City Council for approval, renewal of the lease between the City of Minot and the men's winter refuge, and authorize the mayor to sign.
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Straight, second by Alderman Janser. Discussion. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Straight,
Yes.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 5.2 on our agenda this afternoon is the FAA 2019 Airport Improvement Program. The grant offer, there's 3 recommendations. The acceptance of the 2019 AIP grant offer from the FAA once received, and 2, recommended acceptance of the associated budget amendment to the account for the increase in revenue and expense relative to the 2019 budget, and 3, authorize the mayor and the city attorney to sign the necessary documents.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderman Olson for approval.
Second.
Second by Alderman Janser. Discussion on the motion. Alderman Wolski.
Mayor Sitma, thank you. Maybe a question for our airport director.
Our airport director is out, but we do have someone with
Excellent.
us this afternoon.
Feels like we've got just a procedural get ahead of this by a couple weeks. Is that all this really amounts to?
Actually, we received paperwork in the mail today, Mr. Alderman Wolski, that the grant came in today. It was basically just to kind of, so we didn't have to go to council with this twice and, you know, change the dates and things like that. So everything should be good to go. It was good timing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Number 5.3 on our agenda is authorize initiating involuntary acquisition process for buyout in areas 6 and 6A. Recommended to the City Council authorize the initiating involuntary acquisitions for the buyout areas 6 and 6A, affirming the general authorization grant several years ago.
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Janser to approve.
Second.
Second by Alderman Olson. Discussion. Alderman Straight.
Mr. Mayor, I guess if I could ask a couple questions of, maybe it's Mr. Zakian in the regards to the memo. While Mr. Zakian's walking up in all transparency, my uncle's home is on this list. And I guess that's just kind of, it caught my attention, Mr. Zakian, because I thought for sure this was like 6 or 8 years down the road. So I just wanted to, the $8 million coming from the state, some of these acquisitions might already be in the process, but can you just give us a rough timeline? In the memo, you stated there's the environmental review process. How long does that take before the notices will be sent out?
Mayor Sitma, Alderman Straight, probably 90 to 120 days.
Okay.
It's more extent, even though it's not as deep a dive as some of the other ones we've discussed, it is more extensive in terms of what has to be accumulated. So it does take about twice as long as like for the Gathering Place and for other projects.
Sure. And John, are we caught up to current date in terms of acquisitions through, say, 5, the tieback levee just kind of north of the 3rd Street Bridge?
Mayor Sitma, Alderman Straight. We're caught up in terms of projects known to be either ready to go or should be doable this year and next year. What we are trying to do with this, and it is laid out in the memo, is that we're trying to kind of straighten certain things out that weren't necessarily totally correctly done. 2 of the things is making sure that for an area we defined as needing acquisition, that we have sufficient funds so we don't have to slow down like we've had to do in buyout areas 1 and 2. 6 and 6A, based on our current known estimates, fit perfectly the amount of money amount of new money we've received. Just so there's no confusion, thanks to the efforts of Dan and Ryan and the Joint Service Water Board, we have been able to get some old money, about $3.7 million. That is sufficient so that we can now move forward on the finishing parts of 1 and 2.
Alderman Straight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to be clear, John, that we've known this has been coming for a long time because my family's name is associated with it. I just wanted to kind of talk about it and be open about that fact. When these properties are acquired, because of the gap in time, let's say, from the construction getting to 6 and 6A, will those homes then be quickly demolished once they're acquired? Can you give us a sense of that timeline? My concern being that we go in, some people will voluntarily follow through. I'm not going to lie that my uncle is not going to be volunteering. He's going to be the last holdout. But my fear and concern is that we're going to be acquiring properties and then they're not demolished and they're hanging around 8 years after this disaster. It's that's a concern I have, I think, as we move forward. And I asked Mr. Mayor prior to the meeting that, Mr. Barry, if we move forward with an upcoming town hall, I'd like to see us have a town hall in Southeast Minot to give folks an update about this in particular. I think it'd be very important for people to know it's coming down the pike. I know we have to go through the environmental review, John, but I've gotten emotional up here many times in the past, and it's going to be an emotional time again. But just for what it's worth, let's be mindful of that, because it's 8 years, but once we acquire properties, we just can't be sitting on them. They got to go quickly, or you folks are going to have some challenges down the road. So,
Mayor Sidma, Alderman Straight. To your first point, yes, we will be demolishing these as fast as we can. I understand that we do have a good process that's working, that's actually generating some additional income for us. So as we acquire a property, we will do an assessment. And if the property is salvageable, meaning it could be moved, we will auction it. And if the auction is not successful, then we will immediately put it on the demolition work. So yeah, we've got that process in process now for the past year, and we'll continue. The estimate of the 8 million plus includes both acquisition and demolition. And HUD does expect us to move as expeditiously as possible. I would also add to your second point, and also to facilitate the city manager's consideration on this. Once we send out, which will not occur until after the environmental review is done, what's known as a general information notice, and HUD makes up these acronyms, and sometimes I wonder about them. This one's known as a GIN notice, and we're not talking about free drinks, although I understand that a lot of people might want them based on this process, so I appreciate what you're saying, Alderman Straight. Once we send out the GIN notice, which will go to all the property owners, we can convene a meeting and have an open discussion about the steps that are going to follow. The GIN notice will be at least a 2-page letter. It will outline all the steps, try to calm the waters, so to speak, but I understand that a letter is different than actually hearing and speaking in public in person. So that can be part of the process.
thank you, Mr. Zakian.
John, while you're at the podium here, just correct me if I misstate anything here, as that was a point of discussion that we had with a similar property that was purchased a while back and sat for a very long time. But do want to point out that we do intend to auction those properties that are salvageable, and any of those dollars, program dollars, are then put back into the system to continue to move us forward within that programming. Is that correct, John?
That's correct, Mayor Sipman. Also, we've also discussed this in the past. Not only is it proactive in the sense that we get additional dollars, but it also means the typical cost, which is about $21,000 per typical house, we save that. So it's a double benefit in being able to spread that money out further.
Any further questions for Mr. Zakian, Alderman Wolski?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. John, kind of reading into your memo the fact that this is a cleanup of some past oversights. Are there any additional alternatives towards beyond advancing this part of town this far in advance of anticipated construction? Is there anything else or any other remedies to this particular situation, or?
Mayor Sitmer, Alderman Wolski, good question. The answer is no. I did generically speak at length with the HUD expert on what's known as involuntary and voluntary acquisition. I gave her hypotheticals, and we worked through a solution. This is the solution. And again, if you remember, I've said this before, if the city identifies itself certain matters that may have occurred that need some corrective action, and the city demonstrates they've done that, and the city takes corrective action, then we're never going to get dinged.
Any further questions for Mr. Zakian? Thank you, John. I would only follow up with just a comment. I know several aldermen had sat in one of the last rounds of the meetings when we went through some of the last involuntary acquisitions. It was in this room, and it was very heated, and it was exceptionally emotional for residents, as we can all imagine. I would anticipate similar reactions through this round and future rounds as well. So it's not going to be an easy process, and it's not exactly the most heartwarming meetings when we have them, but the point that we are able to share that information is going to be critical to help give a timeline, and I know Alderman Straight has talked about that several times, is having some sort of idea of a timeline for where we're at with this process is critical for their future planning as well. Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes. Motion is approved. 5.4 on our agenda this evening is the authorization of adding 3 flood-acquired structures to auction bids. Recommendation to the City Council authorizing adding the structures at 420 First Avenue Northeast, 1124 Sixth Avenue Southwest, and 323 First Avenue Northeast to the auction bid program acquired as part of the CDBG NDR Involuntary Acquisition Program supporting flood control projects.
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Walsky to approve.
Second.
Second by Alderman Olson. Discussion on the motion. Alderman Walsky.
Mayor Sitma, thank you. I'm just going to call extra special attention to this, and maybe Mr. Zakian one more time, some questions. I've had citizens reach out wanting to know where to find these types of homes that are being put up for bid. So John, maybe just walk us through the bid or auction process, whether they're going to be minimum bids and where people can find this information aside from at these meetings.
Mayor Sitman, Alderman Walsky, that's a good question. It's always good to publicize it, and this is a good opportunity to publicize it. There will be a minimum bid. It will be set by whether it's the first time, second time. Remember, we do one time, and then it gets reduced second time, and then we get it reduced one more time, and then it's no minimum. And then if that doesn't sell, then we demolish it. We've had, just historically, we've had bids on all 4 levels, so it continues to work. This will be posted on the city website. All the information about the properties and the minimum bid process. All that's necessary is that before the deadline set, that you mail in a sealed envelope your bid price. We will also do a legal notice. We will follow all the procurement requirements of the city. And they're welcome to go out and view the properties as well.
Any further questions for Mr. Zakian? One follow-up?
Mr. Zakian, if people want to get interior access to the properties, obviously it's very easy to drive by them and see them from the street, but if people want to get inside and look at them, is that something we make available?
It is possible. They should reach out to Chris Owen.
Okay.
And that is done through direct line off of our city website. That number is available. Is that correct, Chris?
Yes.
Okay. Further questions? Thank you again, John. Any further discussion on the item? Please call the roll.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Straight.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 5.4 on our agenda is no parking along First Street Northeast at Hammond Park, the mid-block crosswalk. The recommendation the council pass the ordinance to add parking restrictions to the following locations: the west side of First Street Northeast, south 125 feet to 180 feet from the west center of the 8th Avenue Northeast intersection, and the east side of First Street Northeast, south 115 feet to 165 feet from the east center of 8th Avenue Northeast intersection.
I'll move it.
Second.
Motion to approve by Alderman Janser, second by Alderman Pittner. Discussion on the motion. Alderman Walsky.
Mayor Sitma, thank you. I have 4 nephews who play tennis. I spend quite a bit of time down here actually watching. There was a tournament just a couple weeks ago. And that was one of the busier moments. I also did a drive-by on, I think it was Thursday or Friday morning, just to take a look. The rec tennis was in full swing. There were probably at times 30 or 40 kids on the court, a lot of parents out there watching. There was nobody parking on this particular street. And so I have a little concern over the actual need. Based on the drawings, I think the location of this particular crosswalk might be better located towards 8th Avenue or the north end of the complex. Just in observing the pedestrian patterns in the area, typically the people crossing the street here are walking back and forth from the viewing center on the north side over to the playground with kids. And I don't think a crosswalk down in the middle of the block, I don't think they're going to go out of the way for it. Pedestrians have a way of going on the path of least resistance or the nearest path. So my preference would be to revert this back to staff for one more look. I'll also call attention to the 8th Avenue and 2nd Street intersection on the southwest corner. There's some pretty significant pedestrian needs there already. We've got an electrical box that seems to be blocking one of the sidewalks. We've got no curbs. I know this is all part of the larger storm sewer project, but I guess my preference on this one would be to send it back to staff for one more look in conjunction with the Park District. A couple conversations with our Parks Director and their Operations Director. They were aware of the sewer project, but not aware of no parking concerns and the crosswalk. So I think this one needs another look. I don't know if anybody has any other comments, but.
Further discussion on the item?
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Wolski.
I would move that we refer this back to staff for a meeting in conjunction with the Park District.
Second.
We have a motion to refer back by Alderman Wolski and second by Alderman Straight. That does supersede, I believe, the original motion. Any discussion on the motion to refer? Is our traffic engineer, I'm looking around. Oh, right here. Stick out with the yellow shirt. I should have seen you right away.
I know, right?
Perhaps maybe you can just elaborate a little bit on the recommendation on the location here versus some of the other locations, or location rather, that Alderman Wolski had pointed out.
I'll give you a little bit of my background with this project. Mayor Sidma, I didn't choose the location of the crosswalk. I think the initial point of that was directly related to the parking lot, to bring people over right away. My involvement with the no parking signs was to simply increase visibility at the crosswalk, not necessarily where to place it along First Avenue or First Street.
Any questions for our traffic engineer? Perhaps one short, or one question from myself here.
Yeah.
Has there been any discussion with the Parks Department on pedestrian traffic or any of the other typical areas where people are utilizing this as far as the recommendation today?
I can't say there has, and I can't say there hasn't been.
Okay.
This was a public works project. They're the ones who, I guess, initially laid out the design for this. But I personally have not.
Okay. Any further questions for our traffic engineer? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any further discussion, Alderman Straight?
I guess, Mr. Mayor, just to Alderman Wolski's point, and I think this is part of our larger desire from many of our standpoints is to interact more with some of the other political subdivisions. And even if the Park District can sit down with Public Works and our traffic folks and they come to an agreement and bring this back to us in a month, great. I just think it's important that we try to have better communication with the other political subs. That's something I think many of us have talked about. I know it's hard for staff to go and show up at those meetings, but I think it just adds a little element of goodwill. I know
Motion-
they can attend this meeting too, sir, so I apologize.
Absolutely, Alderman Straight. Any further discussion on the motion to refer back? We could revisit this back in 2 weeks if necessary. Any further discussion? Motion is to refer back to City Street Department. Please call the roll.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Straight.
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to number 6, consider the report of the pension board. We have 3 items or 3 pieces on here. Approve the request for the City of Minot pension refund, approve the request for the survivor benefits, and approve the request for the City of Minot pension retirement benefits.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move those items.
Motion to approve by Alderman Janser,
Second.
second by Alderman Straight. Any discussion on the motion? Alderman Janser, you were the one that chaired the pension board meeting that day. Do you have any further comments or?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Most of these items are routine based on circumstance in terms of, folks either retiring or survivor benefits or leaving and not being vested and so getting refunds. And so that's all pretty standard according to policy, and I think it's quite straightforward.
Thank you, sir. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes. Motion is approved. That takes us to number 7, our department report, and Police Chief Jason Olson this evening. Good evening, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Derek, can we get to the beginning of the,
Got the preview of, we're just missing the music, right?
yeah. I'm not going to sing Bad Boys. or
Okay,
anything like
that's
that.
where I was going with that. I'm glad you caught it.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to present. A few months ago, I had emailed the alderman and asked what areas that you might be interested in hearing from me on, and so I included those in the report. We'll start out with our mission statement. I won't go over that, but you can certainly read that. And then the picture from the recent air show at the airport and one of our bike patrol officers. I'll start off with some crime stats and our calls for service. I know frequently you hear from me on how busy we are and what the calls for service are doing. So this first chart shows the growth since 2009, and you can see during the boom years, we grew from 29,000 a year to up to 41,000. And then it's kind of flattened out in that 40,000 range with slight growth the last couple of years. This year, we're up just 0.25% year to date, so pretty flat, just very slight growth over last year. So we're not dipping, we're not going backwards in calls, but we're not seeing the growth that we did, so kind of holding our own. This chart here shows our crime rate for Group A crimes, and Group A crimes is most serious crime. There's a whole list of about 25 different crimes that are grouped into that. And this isn't that, again, this is per 100,000, so it's not that we had 5,550 crimes. We had about half that because our population is, in the ballpark of 50,000. But it's adjusted by inflation, by population each year. So this is our true crime rate for Group A crimes. So you can see over the past 5 years, it's dipped significantly from 6,900 down to 5,500. So it's gone down a little bit up from last year, but gone down from what it was during the boom years.
Chief.
Yes.
Just maybe an opportunity to speculate here a little bit, but calls for service in general going up and this line taking a little bit of a dip over a similar trend. What's making up the difference in terms of the added calls? Any sense of what that is?
Not off the top of my head, I'd have to research that issue. I mean, calls for service can be a lot of different things, anything from an animal call to a traffic accident to, just it runs the gamut. So I'd have to delve into that.
Okay.
The next two slides have 12 different crimes broke out individually, and these make up, part of that Group A crimes. So in most categories, we're trending down. We trended up a little bit in simple assault and aggravated assaults. You'll note the consolidated theft offense on the upper left went down significantly. We were over 1,200 theft offenses and now in the 600, so that's good news there. DUI arrests on the lower left is down significantly from what it was 10 years ago. We used to be up in the 500 or so arrests per year. I attribute most of that to the 24/7 program that the state implemented. That's had a huge impact on DUI arrests across the state. I'll delve into staffing briefly here. So our current effective strength is 86%, and that has stayed pretty consistent between 85 and 90% effective for many years now, basically since the boom started. So we're currently authorized 83 sworn officer positions. And when I say effective, those ones listed below there are ones that don't count right now. We have 3 open positions. We filled 3 positions in July, so those folks are just starting their training. We hired 5 in January, and they went through their in-service, their field training, made it out into the field, and now they're spending their summer at Bismarck in the state academy, the state police academy. So they'll come back to us in August. We'll get 5 back. And then we have 1 on light duty. The demographics of our force there, we have one of the highest percentages in the state of female officers. Currently at 17%. We were up at one point at 22% of our force were female officers. On the picture there, Sergeant Krista Matthijs on the right, it's just one example of an officer, excellent officer, sergeant for our department for over 10 years. And unfortunately, we lose her experience, and she's going to go and be an FBI agent. She's in the FBI Academy right now. So good for her, bad for us. So some more demographics there. We are very young. Everybody that starts out on patrol. About a third of our patrol force has less than 2 years of experience. So that's about 1 in 3 chance that you're going to get an officer on a call that doesn't have a whole lot of experience. There's another close to a third that are between 2 and 5, and then we have a third of pretty experienced officers. Problems, loss of experience, small applicant pools, and that is probably the biggest kind of crisis that we're facing right now in terms of staffing, is we just are not getting applicants. So realistically, we're hiring every qualified applicant that makes it through our process. It's not like we have 10 to choose from or 20 to choose from, or back when I started, 120 to choose from. Those days are gone. And it's not just gone for Minot, it's problems. I just saw a story on the K-Fire TV last week that Bismarck PD is at, I think there's 17 officers down. They're experiencing the same kind of recruiting problems, same kind of retention problems that we are. And I know it's across the state and across the nation, similar problems. It is something I recently spoke with the city manager about our recruitment and retention and the continued problems. And we are forming a task force to be looking at that issue and seeing what else can be done. But that truly is the most alarming thing that I can report to you in terms of an internal issue that we face, is that for whatever reason, young people are just not wanting to go into this profession anymore. And it's getting to the point where it's really getting concerning. Obviously, the efficiencies of losing trained officers has been a problem and is a problem. My goal when I became chief over 7 years ago, I said I want to be the best game in town as far as law enforcement. If you wanted to be a cop, you wanted to work for Minot PD. And I can't say we're there at this point. We continue to lose to probation and parole, to the state BCI, to the highway patrol, to different agencies. And in this next slide, you'll see the turnover since 2010. We've had 95 people leave our department for various reasons. And that's everything from resigning to retiring to being terminated. But of those, about a third have gone to work for other law enforcement agencies. So we're not there yet, and we continue to need to work on that, in my opinion, on being the best game in town. We're not going to compete with the FBI. I know that. You know that. But we should be able to be competitive with Bismarck PD and Fargo PD and the Highway Patrol, the BCI, those agencies. Yes. I'm sorry, Alderman Walsh.
Question. And I think I can probably intuitively guess why we aren't going to compete with the FBI. But what are those factors? I mean, is it the prestige in the career advancement? Is it pay? What are the factors that makes the federal government so much more attractive than us?
Well, I think at that level, I mean, many people aspire to be an FBI agent. It's kind of the pinnacle of your law enforcement career. For many people, they would see it that way. So yeah, it's the prestige. Obviously, they pay better. Federal retirement benefits. It's just,
Okay.
you know. And I will say, in Sergeant Mattice's case, I was on the interview panel when she started with us, and she told me her goal was to be an FBI agent, and now she's achieved her goal. So it's hard to compete with that, and we encourage her, you know, of course.
Alderman Straight.
Mr. Mayor, Chief, since this seems to be a nationwide issue, as you've been talking about recruitment and retention, is there a discussion about you're pressed, the crew works long hours, it's late? Is there some innovation discussions taking place there for hours of labor, cutting down, giving additional days off? I know when you have a limited staff, but that seems like that could be a little more appealing if you can have a larger workforce but give people more flex time. Are there national conversations like that taking place?
I don't know.
Or is it just...
Alderman Stray, I don't know about national conversations. We consistently get very good reviews from our staff on our schedule. Our patrol schedule is a permanent shift. They work 10 hours. They get to bid which shift they want to work. It would be a major morale problem if we departed from that schedule, because they like it a lot. Okay. They get weekends off, you know, about half the time, and as far as giving more time off, I mean, it does kind of compound for those working. Then you have less people working, or you end up paying more overtime and that kind of thing. Sure. We are paying, you know, when we have 3 open positions, we save on the salary side. We do end up paying out more overtime. Now, in the big picture, we save more on the salary side than we do pay out on overtime. But that's how we make up for it when we're short, is to meet our minimum staffing goals. We do end up paying more overtime out. So.
Thanks.
You can see the other numbers there. You know, a certain percentage wash out, a certain percentage have to depart because of some disciplinary action, and about 11%. That's the one number that frustrates me, is that bottom one. We get a number of young people that come to work for us, and sometime in that first year, they decide it's not for me, and it's usually what they say is, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, and they go and they do something in a different profession. But so this shows us where we are as far as the number of officers on our department per population in North Dakota compared to the other cities, and you can see in comparing per 1,000 in population, we have 1 officer for every 588 people, or about 1.7 per 1,000 citizens. The state average is 1.6 and 616, so we're definitely right in the ballpark as far as where other agencies are. Larger cities such as Fargo tend to have less officers per capita. Now I'll touch on our canine program. So these are our 2 canine teams that we've had for a while. These dogs are both dual-purpose dogs to detect narcotics, and then to do patrol functions such as searching for people, searching for objects, and officer protection. So that's what these dogs are trained to do. Our newest dog of these 2, Mace, it was Macy, but he's a male dog, and so we shortened it up to Mace because we thought that sounded a little better. But anyway, we did not imprint Mace on marijuana. And that was specifically with medical marijuana coming and concerns about being able to get a search warrant and that kind of thing. So we chose not to imprint Mace on marijuana. But Lois was an older dog and still is. Lois has about, I think she's 6 years old. The average service life for a canine is 7 to 9 years. She's still in good shape, so we expect to get, you know, several more years from Lois. Our newest dog is an explosives detection dog, also dual purpose. So she is trained to do patrol work, or he is trained to do patrol work, search for people, objects. It's nice to have an explosives detection dog. Not that we have a lot of bombs, but we do have a lot of calls where we need to locate a gun, casings, that kind of thing. It'll come in handy for that. She was recently at the air show doing searches through the parking lots, just walkthroughs, that kind of thing. So we're very excited to have Caspian here. Caspian was funded from a grant from Agribank and Farm Credit Services, and they will be here next month, hopefully, to get some recognition, and we'll bring Caspian and Officer Jensen to show you the dog. Switching to body cameras, this just shows where the body camera rides on our vests and what it looks like, what our load-bearing external vests look like. There's some data on what the cost of the program is. I'll be frank, it's expensive to have body cameras. It basically costs $1,200 and $1,220 per camera per year to have a body camera program. So this year we paid $106,000 for year one of a 5-year contract. It goes down to $65,000 the following 4 years. That's a contract that is basically bumper to bumper warranty for 5 years and unlimited storage on our video. So it's completely capped at those expenses. We're not going to see additional expenses on our body cameras unless we added cameras. That would be the only thing that would drive that contract up. As far as usage, in 2018, over 42,000 videos were uploaded from our body cameras, 10,000 hours of video. And for you techie people, almost 19,000 gigabytes of data is stored on the cloud on that. It's a very user-friendly interface called evidence.com, and we currently use it for not only body cameras, but we are able to shoot video to our prosecutor's office, a link basically, and they can get, and we can put other evidence on there, so we can put photographs on there, audio files, in-car camera video we can upload to this evidence.com, and so it can all be shared through that portal, which is working very well for us. In addition to evidence, we use body cameras to review. When I get an officer complaint on an incident, and there's body camera footage, it makes it very nice to go back and review, see if that complaint is legitimate. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. In internal investigations, we use it for training. We encourage our supervisors to review body cam video to use it to coach the officers, because often that's all they need is to improve in different areas. Just so they sample officers' video and just say, you might want to have done this a little different, or just giving them tips and coaching. So it's a very valuable program, but that's the cost. I uploaded 3 videos into this presentation. The first 2 are kind of a fluff video of a duck rescue that we recently had by former Alderman Cosin, is his body cam. And the last one is just to illustrate from a homicide that we had, that you never know what you're going to capture on one of these, and this was a very key piece of evidence in a homicide trial. And I'll just preview that since they're going to kind of go one after another here. Is that one, the images are blurred out in large part, but the audio was captured of the subject saying, "I just stabbed her." Well, once you have that from the first responding officer on scene, that kind of very critical piece of evidence, as you can see. So here's the first one of the duck rescue.
Oh, don't be silly, you big babies.
As you can see, high quality video.
2. Woo! Good job. There's 3. Duck rescue. Mighty duck. There's 5.
Very good quality, even as he moves around and pans. It stays in focus good, very sharp. This is in contrast to our in-car video, which we need to upgrade that system, and it's night and day, the comparison of the quality of those 2 videos. So this is part 2 of the duck rescue.
We'll get him across the road. It's okay, baby. Come here. Come here, baby. Yeah, Yeah, I'm sure. All right. Here's one. 2 more up the sidewalk. Hey, you big baby. Yeah. Here, baby duck. You're just a little quacker. Huh?
This one's a little bit longer than it needed to be.
You want to go see Mama Bear? Want to go see Mama Duck? Huh? Yeah. I gotcha.
Very good audio,
Alright.
very good video.
Here we go, you big baby. Here you go. Get in there. Get after it. Pitter patter. 2 more are in the way.
And the last one is from the homicide.
What's going on?
Help! Take me to jail,
Where's
sir. Take me to jail, get her. Please, she's going in the shot, sir.
Keep holding pressure.
Keep holding pressure.
Sir, what's your first
Please.
name?
Brandon Morales, take me to jail.
Sir?
They know me already, please.
Just maintain
I stabbed her in the
your
jugular.
calm.
I think I stabbed her in the jugular.
Okay. Be
Please,
calm.
sir.
Be calm. Be calm. Be calm.
If you didn't catch that, he said, "Take me to jail. I stabbed her in the throat."
Wow.
So we'll move from that to the Siren Project update, the statewide interoperable radio project. And I talked to you about that the last time I was in front of you. Since then, the contract has been awarded to Motorola. The legislature looked at funding for this. They passed Bill 1435, which provided $120 million of funding towards this project, which is the total cost statewide is estimated to be about $206 million. So the other $86 million will fall on local agencies to fund. The state has agreed to fund the network core, which is the computers kind of behind the scenes, the radio frequency tower infrastructure, and then give $1,500 grants to local agencies for every mobile or portable radio. So in our case, we have 100 and some mobile portable radios. So for each radio we purchase, we'll get $1,500 back from the state. So the project is being managed by North Dakota ITD and the State Interoperable Executive Committee on the phasing of the project. It's a 5-year build-out is what is planned. I currently sit on the SEIC. PSAPs, which is a public safety answering point or dispatch centers, including Minot Central Dispatch, have received quotes for what it's going to take to upgrade their centers. So in our case, it's $494,000. We recently had a 911 committee meeting, budget committee, and made a recommendation to Ward County to go ahead and do the upgrades to be paid for out of the 911 depreciation fund, which is at Ward County. So that depreciation fund is dollars that have been set aside every year for upgrading, depreciation, or replacing old equipment. So there are dollars already sitting there to do the upgrade dispatches, or upgrades to dispatch.
Chief,
That's kind of where we're at on that project, yeah.
a sense on when the timing of that $494,000 is kind of expected to go out the door?
Probably the most of it later this year, and then some in the spring, with these upgrades to our dispatch to be done by probably April, May next year. So basically what it's upgrading is we have 5 consoles in our dispatch radio consoles, and it's about $100,000 worth of equipment at each console to do the upgrade. And I'll finish up with some challenges and vision for the future. As I talked about already, recruitment and retention. I just want to comment on the digital age. We are in a digital age in so many respects that greatly impacts police work. Everything that we go to now has social media that we have to capture. It has phones and digital video and emails and texts and everything. All of our scenes involve digital images. There's all kinds of surveillance cameras out there that we try and gather digital evidence from. Of course, our own digital evidence from body cameras, in-car recordings, computers, doing searches on computers. Just keeping up with that is a whole new world compared to what we used to do back in the day before all this existed. So it does require a lot of expense and training to keep up with the digital age. Our goal, maintaining a well-staffed, trained, and equipped department to carry out our duties. We want to be accountable, well-managed, and live up to community expectations. And looking forward into 2020, one of the things that we hope to accomplish is what's called CALIA accreditation. And as it says there, the Commission on Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies, that's what CALIA stands for. Essentially what that is, and I think I spoke to you briefly about that at the budget hearing, but it's an agency that makes you prove that you are up to date on standards. So they list maybe 300 standards, and you have to prove as your agency each year that you are in compliance with the standards, which makes sure that you're doing all the training that you're supposed to do. It makes sure that your policies are up to date. It makes sure that your procedures are current. And so not only does that assure that you're providing excellent service, but it also has the benefit of insulating you from some liability. You know, for instance, I'll just say sexual discrimination. There's going to be one of the standards that proves that you trained your staff every year on sexual discrimination. So then if some staff member engages in that and gets into a lawsuit, you can say, well, he was properly instructed and trained. The city should incur less liability if he goes out on his own and does something like that. So that's just one example. So we're hoping to, and there was money put in the budget to achieve CALIA accreditation next year. In 2021, we'll be looking at adding possibly a digital forensics technician and possibly a crime analyst. And I don't want to speak to the 2021 budget too much now, but those are just things that are on our horizon. And lastly, the police station itself, if City Hall does move, we're going to have to do some remodeling within this building just to have it meet our needs. And my last slide is just a reminder on August 6th, I believe it starts at 5 o'clock. I didn't put the hours on here, but at Magic City High School will be the next national night out. So please mark that on your calendars and come and join us over at the high school. So we typically have had over 1,000 people from Minot come to that event, so it's really been good. And I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Any further questions? Alderman Straight.
Mr. Mayor, I know that I won't get needled tomorrow. If I can ask the chief about the dangerous animal ordinance, and Chief, if you have any thoughts about how we having any dog issues in the community, and if that ordinance is worthy endeavor, or is that something that we should reevaluate down the road?
In my opinion, Alderman Straight, the dangerous dog ordinance, animal ordinance is doing exactly as it intended. I'm not aware of any problems with the ordinance or with any specific issues that we're having with pit bulls in particular, as I know that we're not saying that, but that's what we're talking about here. So I believe, I'm not sure if I shared the stats. I know I gathered the stats about 6 weeks ago on how many summons were issued under that ordinance. And the bulk of our ordinance violations for animals were, at least half of them, I think, were probably pit bull violations. So it is being enforced, the pit bull side of it, under the dangerous dog ordinance, which is a separate ordinance. I don't think we had too many violations, less than 4 for sure. So.
Great.
Continue.
Mr. Mayor, one more follow-up. Chief, I'm wondering, my sister coordinates a giant event in the Twin Cities area that 500,000 residents attend, and it almost recently got shut down because they were not going to allow off-duty police officers to police that event. They were going to have the force out. And I'm wondering, is there, do you see problems on the horizon for us? It seems like we are having more and more outdoor events. It's great. Mr. Moss is in the audience now. I know that many officers devote time outside of their regular duties kind of at some of these events. And do you see that as something that we need to be concerned about? Kind of liability issues moving forward with something to that effect? Obviously, we're not a community of that size, but I'm just curious if your thoughts about it. Obviously, it's a great way for some of our officers to have added income, and I think you've done a great job helping some of these events get permitted, sir, and you walk folks down the line. But I just wanted to kind of put that on the horizon. That seems like that's a national issue in larger jurisdictions, but that concerns me in terms of the overall workforce again, and just the crew being exhausted. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there and hear your thoughts initially.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Straight, just to speak to that issue, I mean, we haven't experienced it so far where we've had an off-duty event that we have not been able to staff. Currently, an off-duty officer, the rate is $50 an hour. I will say, just this last week, I happened to be looking at the Blaine, Blaine, Minnesota Police Department website, and Blaine is a similar sized community to ours. And I just happened to, I saw on there that they had an off-duty event policy posted right on their website, so I happened to read that, and I noticed that their off-duty rate was $90 an hour, and if it's on a holiday, it's $180 an hour, and it's right into their ordinance how many officers you have to have for various events and so on. So I don't think we're going to have an issue. Now, recently at the air show, we did basically had to drive some officers to work, and in that case, it was not off duty. It was paid overtime through the city. When then we turned around and built a air museum for a good portion of that policing. But we haven't experienced a shortage yet. So far, the officers are still signing up for those kind of events. So.
Sure. Yeah, great. It was great to see the force at the air show. I thought it was fantastic. Great public outreach. So thank you, Chief. Yep.
Any further questions for Chief Olson? Alderman Patagula.
Basically, I wanted to offer about half a dozen comments, and these are in my role as an alderman and also in my role as a forensic psychologist with 43 years of experience. And also scientist. So first comment is I'm very impressed with the report. I'm particularly pleased with, and my sense is that things are going very, very well with the police department. I'm very impressed that you're giving us numbers and data, particularly over a period of time that we can track that's easy to understand when they're presented in the fashion you presented them. And it's very reassuring information that crime is going down. So obviously whatever you're doing seems to be working. I know nationally that's also happening, I think, overall, and I think it's very important for the public to understand that despite some of the, I think hysteria, the United States is becoming safer. Murders in New York City, for example, are down by factor of 4 or 5. I mean, they should be 0, but so it's happening. And contrary to the perception that people have that this is a very dangerous, crazy country and world, that's not the case, and it's getting better. And people need to hear that, because that's not what many people believe. So the fact that crime is going down here, I don't know how it compares to nationally, what the trends are, but it keeps going down, which is good. I'm also impressed with the increasing diversity we have in our police force, particularly in terms of female officers. I'd like to see us become more diverse, and also in the fire service and other parts of city government. But I think when you're looking at responding to individuals who are in distress or dealing with individuals who may be involved in a law-breaking situation, it's very good to have that diversity. It's really critical, and I'm very pleased. I wish Sergeant Mathis, I knew she was leaving, I would have congratulated her. I mean, that's really a big deal to go to the FBI. And I think the fact that other agencies recruit our applicants and are pleased to have them, our officers, after they've gotten experience, says good things about the department. I wanted to also briefly address the issue of the number that wash out during training and as a result of disciplinary action, and sometimes figuring out that this isn't the life for them. And I wanted to reassure my colleagues on the council, and that's a normal and a good thing. You want people. I mean, ideally, you're never going to get everybody who's a perfect fit. And I think the earlier on in the process people figure out that this is not for them, the better off we are, the better off they are. So I see that as a positive thing. I've done law enforcement officer screening for 40 years, and you're never going to have an absolute fit. And I'd much rather have some leakage or loss, if you will, early on, because that you're never going to be perfect. And if you're keeping everybody that you're hiring, you either have an extraordinary hiring process, which is unlikely statistically, or else you're keeping people on where they shouldn't be on. I mean, there's a normal washout period in any profession, and I think we have to let people do that gracefully and not in a punitive kind of fashion unless they really screw up. So I think the fact we're losing some people really is a positive thing. I also wanted to answer the question, I think I have an answer, you've certainly given a good one, about why don't people go into law enforcement. My reading of it as a forensic psychologist is that this is a national trend. We're not unique, certainly. It's good we have our numbers up, and I guess it's another, hats off to you and the city staff that we're finally getting up to, fairly decent manning personnel levels. But it seems that people nationally just don't value this kind of public service. I think part of that, and no one really is totally sure about that, but part of that, I think, is the publicity regarding some really awful behavior. When you see pictures of officers shooting people or choking them or beating the crap out of them, that turns a lot of people off. And I think a lot of people don't understand that law enforcement, is probably as much social work in some ways. And it's a helping profession, really, just as clinical psychology is. And I think what people see is the shoot 'em up, bang up stuff on TV, which I refuse to watch because I find that very offensive. And I think people's attitudes are shaped by that. They think that this is the rah-rah, macho, Rambo kind of thing. And that turns off people, particularly women-type people. I think people don't see it as an honorable calling. I think the values of our society have shifted. As Mark knows, the military has difficulty attracting people, quality people, for physical fitness reasons, for criminal records, some of which are for fairly minor offenses to some of us. But I think a lot of it is the values, public service, sacrifice, loyalty, courage. I'm getting choked up. I don't see those as being as prevalent values as they used to be. And I'm not sure where people are going, but I think that's an issue for our society to face. The state faces the issues of a lack of physicians, and we start up a medical school. We have to have a law school to provide our lawyers. There's certain professions that are challenging, that are difficult, and the average layperson, the average young person might not fully understand what they are. And society's values, society's preferences change. And whatever the society, my feeling is we have to have a law enforcement, a public safety type function. And it's critical. It's as important as having enough family physicians or nurses or lawyers. And, what we can do in North Dakota, I think, is limited. We can be, I think, a little bit more creative. I'm very pleased you're going to be having this task force. But I think it's really a cultural, a social, and a national issue. People don't see the value of it, and it's so easy for people to be turned off. And, the other thing is I don't spend a whole lot of time, not as much as I used to or should, with your officers. But I just honestly cannot see any of them that I know, doing some of the atrocious things we see on television. I know that those portrayals are often unrealistic. The average officer is not like the officer who beats somebody up. But I just can't fathom. And I travel somewhat, and sometimes the law enforcement people I see on the street in other parts of the country, particularly in big cities, wow, they seem like they're from a different place. I just can't see them behaving like our officers do here. So I think there is something about the Midwest, about the small town that we have that we're able to keep, and I think that keeps our officers from doing foolish things and attracts a certain kind of person who's more willing to help and sees it more as a helping profession. So it is a challenge. Those of us in even allied fields of related to the law see that, and I see it as an important issue. We can make changes here and there and add it, but we're fighting a national trend, and that worries me. That saddens me. Anyway, so I'm very impressed with what I'm hearing. I'm very impressed with what I'm seeing. Excellent report. The underlying data, I think, are excellent in terms of the results we're seeing. And I think this is an area of our city we need to keep investing in. It's an absolutely critical function. So I thank you very much, and I thank more so even the people who work with you and for you and for us.
Thank you, Alderman Patergula. The last thing I would say on that is just, for those of you that know young people that are looking for a career or what to get into, I can testify that it's been a tremendous career. I think they could talk to any of our young officers and they would give a good report on how it is working as an officer in Minot and how much they enjoy it. Even the ones that left almost invariably say, I love the department, I love who I'm working with, and they have some other reason why they need to go on and do something else. It's seldom like, this is a horrible place to work and I can't stand working here. I don't think I've ever heard that. So it is a great department to work for. It's a great city to live in. And so anyone that knows young folks that might be interested, send them our way, because we would definitely give them a look. Alderman Wolski, did you have?
Alderman Wolski, yes.
Mayor, thank you. Chief, yeah, I appreciate the report, and to kind of compliment some of Alderman Patergula's comments. Some of the notes I wrote down here is you were kind of outlining the very specific and real challenge of staffing and getting people into it. And this is such a theme that I keep hearing, regardless of what profession's being talked about or even what department we're hearing from in the city. We hear from our airport director, it's pilot shortages that are really the chokehold for airlines and their expansions. Teachers, nurses, doctors. There are some really significant trends taking place here, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to raise salaries enough, right? I mean, that's one of our compensatory solutions to this, is to try and pay people more to get people into these jobs. I'm concerned about that solution in our future being viable. And so, and I'm also, there's a part of me that as we talk about the additional training and the conversation we're going to have as a part of the budget with, is it Kalia? You know, all of that sounds really fantastic, and there's a part of me that hears these new training opportunities, and I go, I wonder if we want to keep making these investments, because every time we make these investments, we make our officers more valuable to other places. And so there's a part of me that has a bit of a catch-22. I want to do that. I want our officers to be the most trained. But I think there's going to be a point where we're going to have to just continue taking these leaps of faith in terms of investing in our people. And then somewhere along the line, we have to connect the dots between those investments and loyalties to this place, this community, this department. And I don't know what those steps are. I hope it is conversations like this, frank conversations where we choose to make the investments and invest in our people. But somewhere along the line, this paradigm has to flip a little bit, right? And so where people are seeking us out, not only as their training grounds, but as their place to invest, raise their families and things like that. And I think a lot of that has to do with some of our other conversations that tie into economic development and placemaking and the work that's going in to try and, you know, create a community that's really attractive to people. All of these things tie together, and this is, like I say, I think I appreciate you guys forming the task force, acknowledging that this is the most urgent blinking light on the dashboard. But I think we as a council in particular need to be at least a tier up, looking holistically at a lot of these other things too. So whatever input along the way that you guys have to provide to that, Chief, I think you'd have a council that's more than willing to listen and hear.
Sure. Thank you.
Any further questions for the chief? Thank you, Chief.
You bet.
That takes us to number 8 on our agenda, the liaison reports. And perhaps I'll start with Alderman Patagula this evening.
I have nothing to report. The committees and organizations I'm liaised to haven't been meeting. As soon as they start, I'll start attending and start reporting.
Alderman Olson.
I have nothing new to report other than I am scheduled to be part of the 2020 Census Committee, which will be meeting this week. So next time I hope to have something to report.
Alderman Straight.
Mr. Mayor, visit Minot. We have a meeting on Wednesday, and over the weekend there was a women's softball tournament and some other tournaments in town, and there seems to be a larger conversation and a discussion and a need for a more visible and productive, I'm going to call it the tournament committee again. It was formed at one time. It just seems like there are some people that are really working hard to bring tournaments and events to town that put heads in beds, and these folks spend money at restaurants, but there just needs to be a larger, kind of more cohesive task force, I think, with that. And I think that's something to look forward to in the coming days.
Alderman Wolski.
Mayor, quick update on Planning and Zoning Steering Committee. We met last Wednesday. We had the first of what's probably at least a couple discussions on larger community aesthetics and guidelines and the manner in which our zoning ordinances tie into those. Some very direct and important feedback from those in our building and construction industry, design industry, but also comments that do support wanting to see a nice looking town and standards that we can be proud of. So I would invite everybody who may have an interest in that conversation, catch up with us at our next meeting. I believe it's next Wednesday. I'm getting a nod from Mr. Billingsley, and I'm glad of that. But so yeah, it's Wednesday mornings, 8:30 here in council chambers. And the work that's going on there is pretty deep-rooted policy stuff that is sort of first mover kinds of things. These are the policies that do impact lots of decisions further down the food chain. So a great time to be a part of the process.
Alderman Janser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City-county liaison has not met, so I have no new reports.
Okay. And Alderman Bittner.
Thank you, Mayor. Ward County Planning and Zoning, we held a open house last week on the comprehensive plan for citizens of Ward County to come in and speak with county staff and whatnot. So we look for more information for that from our planning and zoning meeting coming up on how that went and any input we had from citizens. And then I will be attending my first library board meeting this Thursday, so I'll have more information for you on that.
Thank you, Alderman Pittner. That takes us to number 9 on our miscellaneous and discussion items, and I would just offer up just a little bit of information as far as goings-ons within the community, seeing as we are walking into kind of one of our busiest times within the city. So tomorrow night, we have the Exhibition Baseball All-Star Game here in Minot. The Sabre Dogs have a number of representatives out there. They're at Corbett Field. I only noticed on their website only a few seats left, so it looks like this is going to be a well-attended event. The Home Run Derby is going on right now. But I will be at the All-Star Game event, and then the North Dakota State Fair kicks off on Friday night. I expect our police department to be working again very diligently out there with Ward County Sheriff's Department and with State Fair folks, keeping all of us safe. I think Rascal Flats kicks off Friday night. I'll be out introducing that group and welcoming everyone to Minot, and then the State Fair Parade is on Saturday morning. And our fire department, our police department, and many other city officials will also be in that parade, including myself. Any other miscellaneous and discussion items?
Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Wolski.
I've got a couple things. Two of them are kind of just sort of brief informational requests. One, going back to February when we approved the MADC contract, there was a deliverable for a kind of an 18-month plan. It's my understanding that's been delivered to the city. I would appreciate that item being sent out to members of the council. I think pretty important as we approach the budget to see what that plan looks like. Second, I think we all got an email, or at least I know I got one regarding mosquito spraying. Conversation in the community. Obviously, it's that time of the year. I'm no great fan of mosquitoes, and I'm frankly a pretty big fan of not having mosquitoes. But at the same time, I think this is a program that deserves an evaluation. I think in particular, I'd like to know what it's costing us. I'd like to know what details we have. I know it's part of the city's news release on this, the NALED or the NALED, I don't know how to say it. But I'd also like to know how we're measuring the effectiveness of the program, if we're measuring traps and things like that. If this is proving valuable to the community in terms of public health, in terms of reduction of mosquitoes in the air, let's find that information out or figure out where we're doing it. And then additionally on that same topic, our citizen really, I think, wisely pointed out that mosquito mitigation also comes down to preventing habitat and getting rid of breeding areas. And so I think as part of the communication strategy that we put out with the city in terms of letting people know about the spraying, we should also be using that opportunity to talk about ways to prevent new crops coming up. So kind of maybe a request to our communication staff. Finally, as a policy topic tied to our larger IEDC conversations, it's been about a year since we had an initial discussion item related to the International Existing Building Code. That kind of got set on the back burner with regards to some of their issues. But I was hoping we could have an update on where we're at with that from the staff at some point in the near future. I've had a couple significant and I would say concrete examples of people in the private sector making investments in buildings and pointing to places where that particular code would have provided some significant relief. And I think that's a policy decision that is absolutely in the wheelhouse of this council. And I would like to see us take it up sooner rather than later.
On the last part, City Manager Barry can maybe expound a little more on the building code. The last information that I had is that it is moving forward and we are working towards adoption.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's correct. We have been making some slow progress, also monitoring what the state's done as well. And I can certainly get you a more detailed update at the next council meeting, both on the mosquito effectiveness and IEBC. And then I will send the MADC deliverable to the full council probably tomorrow, if that's all right.
And for reference, the mosquito spraying is expected to take place this week, either on Tuesday or Wednesday, and I think it's always weather permitting. I think our PIO can correct me if I'm incorrect on that date. And just going back a number of years, for my journalism years, is when we were watching the West Nile cases growing in number throughout the region, and that certainly, I can't remember the last time that we've actually had one reported within the city limits, but I would have to defer to First District Health Unit on their traps and the numbers and things like that. But absolutely, to Alderman Wolski's point, there are certain things that can be done to mitigate the growth and the expansion of that. Of course, Mother Nature always has those own plans when it comes to weather, so there's only so much that we can do to that. But beyond that, is there any other items before us this evening? If not, I would move to number 10 on our agenda, adjournment.
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Janser.
Second.
Second by Alderman Olson. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.